Hello, and welcome to our 8th grade curriculum hotspot video. In these hotspot videos, we'll be going over with you every NGSS performance expectation that can be found in the 8th grade science curriculum. This hotspot video focuses on sexual versus asexual reproduction and inheritance, which is the standard MS-LS32. Let's take a deeper dive into the standard. MS-LS32 states that students will demonstrate an understanding can develop and use a model to describe why asexual reproduction results in offspring with identical genetic information and sexual reproduction results in offspring with genetic variation. So let's break this down. What do students need to know? So again, this standard requires them to understand patterns of inheritance and to be able to use and develop models to further comprehend methods of inheritance. Some questions students will ask during this unit are, what are the similarities and differences between sexual and asexual reproduction? And how can we model patterns related to inheritance? What do students not need to know about this standard? Well, let's take a look at the clarification statement that was in this NGSS performance expectation. The emphasis is on using models such as Punnett Squares, diagrams, and simulations to describe the cause and effect relationship of gene transmission from parents to offspring and resulting genetic variation. When you're teaching this to students, you should not go into detail on mitosis versus meiosis and other molecular processes. There's just a very broad understanding of students understanding that genes and genetic information can be passed from parents to offspring, and just explain the basic differences between sexual and asexual reproduction, and using models like Punnett Squares to help them comprehend this. To meet this standard, you should use plenty of visuals and models to allow students to understand sexual and asexual reproduction. Some of these models are pictured on the screen here for you. Furthermore, students will need to learn and practice how to develop Punnett Squares to determine percent chances of offspring inheriting certain traits from their parents. Let's compare the standard to that of the high school standard. Again, at the middle school level, the standard says that students who demonstrate an understanding can develop and use a model to describe why asexual reproduction results in offspring with identical genetic information, and sexual reproduction results in offspring with genetic variation. The standard will be built on high school with standards HSLS31 and HSLS32, in which students will ask questions to clarify relationships about the role of DNA and chromosomes, encoding the instructions for characteristic traits passed from parent to offspring. And they'll be at the high school level, they'll be able to make and defend a claim based on evidence that inheritable genetic variations may result from new genetic combinations through meiosis, viable errors occurring during replication, and/or mutations caused by environmental factors. For this specific standard, the phenomena that we're going to look at is how can siblings look so different if they share the same parents? Students will ask this question at first, and as they learn more content related to this standard, they should be able to address this phenomena and driving question by the end of the unit. Let's look at some resources that are embedded in our curriculum that will help support you to help your students be proficient in meeting this NGSS standard. This first resource is a website that looks at a simulation. In the simulation, students will click on one of the organisms that are shown on the screen. A pop-up will occur and show students a description of that organism. Students will then determine what they think if this organism undergoes sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction, or both types of reproduction. Once they provide an answer, the website will tell students whether or not their answer was correct with an explanation. Another way to alternate this activity to meet the needs of your students is have them work in cooperative groups or with a partner. The students can identify which organisms reproduce sexually and which organisms reproduce asexually by completing this online simulation together. Together, they can click and read descriptions of each organism and then vote on whether each organism reproduces asexually or sexually within their group. Students can also record their predictions and answer sheets on a sorted out table activity. Another resource is the Dog Show DNA. In this activity, students create and decode a DNA recipe for a man's best friend to observe how variations in DNA lead to the inheritance of different traits, which is called Dog Show DNA. In our curricula, we provide a teacher guide as well as a student version of this handout. In this activity, students will be able to get genetic information, and they will be able to create their dog based on that inheritance pattern that they get, or whatever the strips show. Another example is this Punnett Squares simulation. With the heredity level of this connected by a multi-level simulation, students breed pairs of mice with different fur colors and observe the phenotypic or trait ratios in the resulting offspring. The goal of this activity is to demystify the science behind Punnett squares and encourage students to explore data and statistical representations in genetics and heredity. Thank you for taking part in this hotspot video. If you have any questions, feel free to contact our ACPS Science Office, and someone will get back to you. Again, please take a look at all of our other NGSS hotspot videos embedded in our curricula to decode other NGSS performance expectations embedded in our curriculum.